Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kim Barrett Show. I am your host, Kim Barrett, and on today's episode, we are joined by Brandon Fong. So if you've been someone who's ever wanted to connect, build deeper relationships, reach out to people, maybe you've been a little bit scared or worried or cautious about connecting, this episode is for you. You're going to want to dive deep into it. It's going to break down a couple of different strategies you can use to open conversations easier with those people that you've been meaning to connect with. And of course, if we can ever help you connect your marketing and your sales together, head over to our free Facebook community, www.joinmygroup.com.au, which goes straight to our Facebook community where we've got free trainings every week, plenty of resources to help you grow and scale your business. But until then, let's jump into the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time.
Kim, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great to have you, man. Now, I always like to start the podcast off the same way every time, which is if I met you and we were at a party and we were chatting and I said to you, Brandon, what is it that you actually do? What's your go-to?
Yeah. It's a tough question to answer, not from the perspective that I can't answer it, but I always like to find out more about the person that I'm talking to first, just so that I have some context, just because I feel like people don't really care about what you do until they know how much you care about them. So if we were starting a conversation, I would want to find out more about what it is to be the world's only certified baller. I would want to know how you traveled to 31 countries, and I would want to know about this tequila stuff that you've got going on. But assuming that I know a little bit about that you're kind of actually interested in what I do instead of just like the surface level what I do. If I look back at my life, I would say the most common theme is connection, and connection in every sense of the word. I love connecting with people. I love connecting deeper with myself. I love connecting people with ideas and stuff like that. So that's the greatest theme. So how I manifest that in my life is that my sweet spot is helping B2B entrepreneurs with a podcast that isn't monetizing. I can help them to leverage the show to build world-class relationships with incredible people and do it in an incredible way that really builds that trust. And, it goes much deeper than the surface level crap that you see a lot out there. So that's the high level answer.
Nice. I love that. And so what got you into that? Like, were you always just wanting to connect with people as a kid, or did you see a little bit of a gap when you were growing up, or like, how did all that come about?
Yeah, I'll tell a really quick story. So the abbreviated version of the story is I grew up on the free lunch program as a kid, and I was super embarrassed by that because I went to a school district that was relatively wealthy. So I was one of the few kids.
What is because we don't have that. I don't think we have that in Australia. What is the free lunch program?
Yeah. Good. Good clarifying question. It basically government assistance. Like my family needed some financial help growing up. So like my meals were paid for as a kid. So it's like, I would go through the lunch checkout line and my heart would race because like I would watch as my friends go through and they would type in their student ID and it would say $5 or whatever. And then I would type in my number 156403 and then it would show up on the computer screen, Brandon Fong, $0.00. And so I had all these tactics to like distract my friends from seeing the fact that I was on that program. There was the hide in the bathroom until there's no one until the lunch line was free to myself strategy. There was the distract the person at the last minute that I was talking next to so that they didn't see the screen. So that was what sparked me wanting to change and make things different for myself. I think that's kind of where the desire to be an entrepreneur came, but where the connection came from is a few years later, I had the opportunity to compete in an international business plan competition. Found out that the trip was way more expensive than I could afford, obviously, because of what I just explained there. But my dad came up with this brilliant idea and introduced me to my first ever mentor who opened the doors to connecting with people. So I was 16 years old. This business plan that I was competing with was called the Sizzlin' Ninja Food Truck. It's like nothing crazy or world changing there. But she taught me how to fundraise by connecting with high level people. And she opened her network to help me connect with some of these incredible people starting at age 16. And so there's so much that I could go into there. That's obviously the much abbreviated version, but I just saw I was able to pay for that entire trip by following one piece of advice that my mentor Brenda gave me. And she said that if you ask for money, you'll get advice. But if you ask for advice, you'll get money. And so the way that manifested, and it sounds kind of piffy and cool, but I didn't really quite understand what that meant until she showed me that to build relationships with these people, ask for feedback on your business plan. And then once they've invested and provide you feedback, ask if they be willing to donate to your trip. So I ended up paying for my entire trip that way, qualified for this national competition, didn't place, but it was that the most valuable lesson that I learned was that if you learn how to connect with people, that's really where the value is you can do things the easy way or you can do things the hard way. And so I think for the rest of my life, since I saw that, whenever I was looking at figuring something out, I always just looked to figure out who's already figured this out and how can I figure out a way to build a relationship with them. And so that was some of my earlier experiences starting from age 12 to age 16 that kind of set the foundation, I think, moving forward.
And then what was the, obviously that was already like semi in the world of business, right? Because you were doing business plan and things like that. How did that then move into obviously what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I leveraged those connection skills to my senior year of college. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was actually studying entrepreneurship. I had written a book in college and that was pretty cool. I got it ranked pretty well, but it wasn't enough to sustain me or build anything. I worked on a startup company and that didn't end up working out. So my senior year, I was like, well, what the hell do I do now? So I ended up leveraging that, going back to that foundation. And I ended up reaching out to a really successful entrepreneur. His name was Jonathan Levy. At the time, I was a fan of his podcast, and he had about 100,000 students in his online courses, 1.5 million downloads on his podcast, TED Talk, all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of like a David versus Goliath moment. It felt like who am I, some 21-year-old kid, to reach out to the successful entrepreneur? But I did, and the email went something along the lines of, "Hey, Jonathan, I listened to episode 47 of your podcast with Noah Kagan. I took it and I implemented it. And this is the results that I got." That's obviously, I'd be a little bit more specific than that, but just going off the top of my head. And I was like, I went a little bit deeper on your site and I found out 3 specific things I'd love to help you with. And I don't want to charge for it, but if you like my work, let's figure out a way to work together. And if not, then you didn't pay for anything and we can go our own separate ways. And so I think it's a cool and easy play to do as a 21-year-old, but that turned into me running his marketing for 3 years. I was on the team when we added about 150,000 students to his online courses, 1.5 million downloads to his podcasts. And he also got into a really high level group called Genius Network, which I mean, if you're not familiar with, yeah. So he got in there and lots of 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. And Jonathan finished his first meeting, sends me a Slack message and is like, "Hey man, how would you like to come to the next meeting?" And I was like 22 at the time. And so I got to hang out at Genius Network level when I was 22. And it opened my eyes to the power of connection once again. And so since leaving Jonathan's company, I've kind of continued to expand on that. And so it just so happens that I think podcasting is the greatest expansion for me and giving my gift of connection to the world. And I truly believe I'm here to make the world a more deeply connected place. And so the more that I can help people do that, and the more alignment I feel and the more velocity there is.
And how do you find people? Because I know that some people are probably listening to this or watching this and they're like, "Man, you sound like a extrovert. Like Brandon sounds like he's out there, he's going and jumping and connecting with the people that are a bit more introverted or a bit more cautious on the way that they connect with people and things like that." How have you either helped, other clients navigate it, or what have you kind of seen? Because I think most people would be like, "Man, this Brandon guy sounds like he's got so much energy and he can go out there and do that." But little old me, introverted over here, like, would it work for me?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've been asked that. Actually, I take that back. I was asked that earlier today, and I'll answer it this way. I think the question about introversion or extroversion has more to do with the theme of connection. Like, because if you feel deeply connected with someone, I feel like as an introvert, and I can't speak because I'm an extrovert, but I would assume that as an introvert, if you're having a conversation that you feel is with somebody that you're connecting with, you may not obviously get the same energy that an extrovert would get, but it's going back to that theme, that human theme of wanting to develop real relationships with people. That's really what we're here for. And I think that what might get in the way of many introverts looking at an extrovert that makes it easier, like it's easy for Brandon to say, but I think what would help solve that for lots of people is if you simply looked at it from the perspective of building a relationship with somebody that would be like a close relationship that you would have with a friend or something like that. So if you had more relationships like that, I think it makes it a little bit less scary. I think what people get into an issue is where you put people on a pedestal, and that's really where it gets hard, is when you create that dissonance between you and the people that you want to reach out to. So hopefully that answers your question, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And that was going to be like the next kind of question I was going to go into, is like, with that, as you mentioned, obviously putting people on a pedestal, which can kind of cause that separation and dissonance between wanting to reach out to someone. Was it just natural for you? And you were just like, well, I'm just going to reach out to them? Because I know some people be like, "Oh, I could never reach out to such and such, or I could never do that because why would they want to hear from me type thing.
Yeah. I think I was, first of all, going back to that 16-year-old experience, like I'm sure that's pretty rare. Not that many people experience that. So my eyes were open to that. This was a possibility first. I think that everybody kind of needs a first domino moment. And it goes back to something that my dad taught me at really, really young. It's like the worst thing that they can say is no. I mean, like that's one thing that I think like people get all up in their heads about, like, oh, what are they going to say? What are they going to think of me? Like, what if Kim thinks I'm the worst person on the planet for reaching out to him? Like those are the things those are the danger loops that we go in your head. But at the end of the day, you're not going to find out unless you hit that send button for the very first time. So I lost track of the question, but I think that's one of the biggest mentality shifts that you can make to hit that jump.
Yeah, 100%. I know that was when I started this podcast. So I had a couple podcasts with different hosts and whatnot. But when I started this one, Grant Cardone, who some people would know, like big in sales and all that sort of stuff, was coming over to Australia, wanted to do podcasts, wanted to get in front of people for a big event he was doing over here. So I was like, they were like, we want experienced podcast hosts. And I was like, well, I'm an experienced host. I can ask good questions. My current podcast did not exist, but I was about to launch it. So I was like, I may as well just ask and see what happens. Because again, worst thing he can say is, no, I'm not going to interview you. So I reached out, hit him up. And when he was coming to Australia, which surprised me, most people did not respond to the call out for podcasts. They were like, we want to be on podcasts. And most people did not message in, did not email in, did not try and reach out because they were like, he would never be on my podcast. The first guy in Australia that interviewed Grant when he came over here had never done a podcast interview before. Was like really nervous, like couldn't even like talk, hired someone to come and film it. They came in with like a television studio camera. He had no experience in setting up for the podcast or anything. And and it was like did not work at all for that guy. But apparently he went, by the end of the interview, he was a bit more relaxed, but it was the first ever podcast interview he'd ever done. So he was able to get it because no one else reached out. No one else wanted to connect and get him to come through. So
I'd love to turn the tables on you, Kim, if you don't mind me asking, like, when was that aha moment for you? Like, when did it become, because I know everybody has trepidation. You're not born making this easy, but like, did you have a light bulb moment that made it easier for you to connect with people too?
Well, it was similar to what you said about, well, the worst thing that you can say would not, like, I always tell a story. There's like, when I was a young kid, I was on a forum, I was running it. And I was like, we wanted to get sponsorship. So same, I was like, logically speaking, I can email out all these people, ask for sponsorship. Worst thing they can say is no. They're probably going to want to sponsor this forum because there was a lot of traffic on it at the time. And I ended up raising I think it was like $45,000 in like money and prizes and things like that. And I was like, well, there you go. Like all you got to do is ask and see what's going to come out the other side. So similar to your story, for me, once I knew that, I was like, well, the worst thing, again, I don't mind if they say no. And it's even easier on email. It's not like I have to be in like face to face and be like, hey, will you come on my podcast? And then they just shut you down. It's like an email, right? It's like, it's even less risky. In person might be a bit more nerve wracking, but being that it's email or direct message or anything like that, I always think it's like, well, this is the easiest way. It's like, there's no like visceral, I can't see them being like, no, you suck, I don't want to speak to you, right? You don't have to deal with that. It's just like, no, or no, thank you, or you get no response. So if that's the worst that can happen, like, I think that's justifiable.
Yeah, 100%. And I would encourage anybody that might be scared to do an outreach. It's like what I found oftentimes is that you run into this danger loop in your head. And you just kind of get like, oh, like, but then the moment you put it on paper or the moment that you journal about it, like if you're having issues with this right now and you simply pull out a piece of paper and you say, what's the worst that can happen? Like maybe the worst thing that happens is they tell you to go die and you're the worst person on the planet. Like let's say you get that email as a response, which is like, first of all, the first question you can ask after you write that down, let's say you write that down, that's the worst thing that can happen. The second question is, how likely is that to happen? Probably close to zero. But let's say it does happen. Can you get over it? Probably. It's just an email. It's not going to hurt you. And like anybody that's ever done anything great in this world has have to do some form of self-promotion and starting to build those relationships. So and I could share some ways that make that a little bit easier, but I've just found over time, as you get that momentum, it gets a lot easier. And so getting that first few outreaches underneath your belt, and there's a right and a wrong way to do it, obviously, but once you get that momentum, you realize that it's not as scary as it seems, and lots of good things, lots of huge upside can come. If you look at the opposite of that question, what's the best that can happen? If the worst that can happen is they tell you that you're the worst person ever and you could deal with that, but the best side is you get a relationship with someone like Kim, or you get a relationship with Grant Cardone, then I think that's worth taking that jump. So hopefully that helps maybe somebody that would be worried about that.
Yeah, 100%. Now, like I always, because I think the right things to do are always easy to find. I think the wrong things to do sometimes make it a little bit harder, because sometimes it's like you just do something in slightly the wrong way and it can kind of mess things up. So you mentioned there's right ways and wrong ways. What are some of the ways that you've seen people, maybe even, done some yourself in the very early days? Like, what has been some of the things to like avoid when trying to connect with people and reach out?
I'm going to try something. I'm going to risk something a little bit here, because we're obviously recording this. Obviously you could edit it out if we need to, but are you a LinkedIn user, Kim? Do you use LinkedIn a decent amount?
Oh, not a decent amount, probably a terrible amount. I probably have like 1,000 message requests and unread things on there.
Sure. Well, what I was going to ask you to do, and we can still do it if you want, is to pull up your phone and open up your LinkedIn app and open up those messages. And if you're listening, you could do this right now, but I guarantee if you look at the last 10, 15 people that have sent you a connection request, it's nothing that would make you actually want to open them and develop a relationship with these people. It's like the example of, there's like, you see all these terrible drivers when you're driving around, right? Like all these people that are terrible drivers, but you're never the terrible driver, right? Like you're never the one that ever makes the mistake. I think it's the same thing when it comes to sending these outreach messages. If you right now open up your LinkedIn profile and have you pulled one up, Kim? Did you?
Yeah. So like, do you want me just to click on like one of the first ones?
Click on a few of them, just so people get a feel of something legit that's raw. Like we didn't plan this, like, and like, don't read their name, but like maybe read a few of the random ones that you're seeing in there. What do they sound like?
Yeah. I mean, look, not the best. Like there's, for example, one, it's like, hey, I hope you don't mind me reaching out to you on LinkedIn. We're always connecting with interesting businesses to network with. And that sends me another message being like, I'm going to be quick and respect your time. You probably get lots of messages. How protected is your business from cyber attacks?
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah. And then trying to get me on a 15-minute call straight away. Yeah. Nice to connect with you. I see that they've just read my title, at Your Social Voice. Do you guys give trainings, and are you looking for speakers?
Yeah. So nothing that you'd be excited to respond to. Right. And I guarantee almost anyone, if you took the time, if you did that, like you'd find a very similar world. So going back to your question, what you'd want to do is the exact opposite of everything that you're seeing inside of those LinkedIn messages. And what most people think that you need to position yourself as the cool person reaching out to, or like solving an immediate problem. But at the beginning of the relationship, you just need to know that you care about them. That's really all it is. You have to take the time to get to know who they are as a person. So I'll jump out of the LinkedIn world and I'll go into the email world, just because obviously LinkedIn, you have smaller space character limitations or whatever. But if you're sending someone an email, instead of doing exactly what Kim just read or whatever, it's just like, can I have 15 minutes of your time? What if you took the time to listen to an episode of Your Social Voice and you sent an email to Kim and you said, hey, Kim, I listened to episode 37 of the show, or I listened to the episode with Brandon Fong. and you said, I love the part where Brandon shared XYZ, or this other guest shared what XYZ. I took it and I implemented that, and it made this impact in my life. Thank you so much. How would you feel about receiving a message like that, Kim? Would you want to at least continue reading a little bit more?
Yeah, 100%. I know like there's been at least probably 3 guests that we've had on the podcast based on that, them actually reaching out. And I was like, just because they put in the effort, I was like, I have to reward that effort. You know what I mean? And it's like someone doing that. It's like, it's always, makes me feel more positive towards them than anything.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's what I would encourage anyone to do. And I call this the loved plus specific formula, right? And I have a 3-step process to this. There's the compliment, which is what we're discussing right now, the irresistible offer, and the no-oriented question. So going back to the compliment, a really easy way to think about this is something I call the love plus specific formula. Basically, you want to get your first few sentences of your outreach to be to the point where there is no way I could ever copy and paste this message and have it apply to someone else. There's no way. So like going back to like what on the Your Social Voice site, like they got these cool things about the people that work at Your Social Voice, and Kim has it listed that he's the world's only certified baller, and he's been to 31 different countries, and he's a tequila connoisseur. Like those relate to Kim as a human being, right? Like those are the things that we love talking about. I love talking about spike ball. I'm a huge spike ball nerd. If somebody started talking to me about spike ball, or at least brought it up, I'd be like, okay, that's cool. Like I appreciate that, so the love plus specific formula is like loved XYZ, specifically XYZ. So like it could be a podcast, it could be a blog post. Like I checked out this blog post on your site about this, specifically like the point where you talked about XYZ. Thank you so much for sharing. I used to think it was easier, self-explanatory, but if you just think about it from that perspective of like the love plus specific, it may make it a lot easier for you. So that's the first component. Did you want me to go through the rest of them, Kim, or do you have any follow-up to that?
This good stuff.
Cool. So the next part is the irresistible offer. So, going back to what Kim just read from his LinkedIn profile, it's like so many people jump right into like a 15-minute meeting, and you don't even know why you should care at this point, right? So like you always have to put yourself in the perspective of the person that you're reaching out to. And so going back to that first message that I sent to Jonathan Levy that kind of sent the whole snowball for me, I took the time to put myself in Jonathan Levy's shoes and thought, there's this quote, you can't read the label from inside the jar, right? And so like everybody's sitting inside of a jar. You as a business owner is sitting inside of a jar. And so having that outside perspective is really valuable. So I did that for Jonathan. I said, hey, these are some things that I noticed, and I came up with some projects that I would love to help and support you with. Obviously, everyone's not going to sit here and do free work, but you do have to think about from the perspective of the other person, what's valuable to these people? Is it a connection that you can make for them? Is it exposure that you could give them? Like, do you have a podcast? That's why podcasting is such an awesome platform, because you can reach out to someone that you're looking at building a relationship with, or an author that you admire, a book that's really impacted you. And you can not only give them the opportunity to share their message with your audience, but you could also, once they're in your world, you can say, I know some people that have been other guests on my show. It might be a great opportunity to connect you if you feel like it's a good fit. Obviously, like not forcing it, but always put yourself in their perspective. And I learned this like initially when I wrote scholarship applications to apply for college. I always thought about it like, who's reading the message, right? Like, so think about it from them. So there's a quote by Dean Jackson: a compelling offer is 10 times more powerful than a convincing argument. A compelling offer is 10 times more powerful than a convincing argument. And I feel like in today's world, it's a lot of like rooftop marketing. It's like people that are just shouting from the rooftops. It's exactly what was living inside of your LinkedIn email inbox right now. It's like people are saying, buy my, can I swear on the show?
Go for it.
It's the buy my shit show, So it's like, so how can you do the exact opposite of that and instead provide something that's super, super valuable for them to open the door to the relationship? And again, this goes back to the question too. You may be saying, okay, this is a lot of work to send to every single person. But if you're thinking about it strategically, there are certain relationships that are worth strategically, not as a human being, obviously, right? But like there are strategic relationships that are worth way more to invest your time into kind of outreach like this, and some that aren't. So obviously apply this thinking to like, what are those relationships that would really make a difference in your business if you had them as strategic partners or clients or whatever that would be. So that's a little bit more context. I can pause a little bit on the irresistible offer. Is there anything else that you wanted to jump in there?
No, I think that's great. As you mentioned there, like it's you've got to. The whole component is just put yourself, like, I think you could probably, distill all the things you said there. Put yourself in that person's shoes. Like, of course, when you go up to someone, you don't just start yelling at someone if you meet them at a bar. I always call it like the bar test. It's like, how would you operate if it was a real person? You're not just going to go up and spew on them, right? You've got to like actually build a relationship. So yeah, I love what you're saying there. Spot on.
Yeah. So let's kind of recap a little bit. So now you received this message. Somebody took the time to reach out to you and say something very specific about what you're doing. They've done the thinking ahead of time to show that they want to add value to you. Now, the last part is, so that was a compliment, irresistible offer. The last part is called the no-oriented question. And I learned this from Chris Voss. He wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. And if you're not familiar with him, he's an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. So this is the dude that's on the phone with a lunatic that's in the basement of a bank about to blow up the whole damn place. Like, what do you say? What do you say to that guy? Right. And so what Chris teaches is that we have a finite amount of yeses that we can give every single day, because every single time you say yes, what does that mean? It means you're giving away your time. It means you're giving away your energy. It means you're giving away your effort. You're giving away something whenever you say yes to something. But the exact opposite is true with no. Like, you feel more safe, you feel more secure. And so empowering people to say no is actually very beneficial. So that's part one of the no-oriented question. The other thing that I think is really relevant is that no one likes being pushed into something, right? People love to buy, but they hate to be sold, right? Think about like that crappy car salesman versus if you were to go test drive a Tesla, like they don't ever try to sell you anything, right? Like they just like, it's just like, here, like go check it out. And if you want to buy it, like go click, make your 10 clicks on the website and get your Tesla, right? There's like no sales there at all. Or Costco, or I don't know what you guys have in Australia, but like there are lots of these companies that have built buying based cultures instead of selling based cultures. And so that's what you want to do with this. The no oriented question is not only make it easy for them to say no, but also give them the choice, allow them to lean in. Don't say, can I have 15 minutes of your time? That's really abrasive. And it's like not everyone, you're not going to respond to a cold 15-minute thing, you know? So how does this actually apply? I'll rewind back and then I'll do the whole thing. So love plus specific, irresistible offer. And then the last thing would be something along the lines of 100% up to you, but would you be opposed to me sending over next steps to feature you on my podcast? Or 100% up to you, would you be opposed to me sending over the Google Doc that I put together with some ideas that I think would be valuable for you, or something like that? So like, you're not forcing it to them, and you're taking the time to really love on this person, right? Like you care about them, you want to add value to them, and like you're not shoving it in their face. You're just saying, hey, like I care about you. This is something I think would be valuable for you. Do you want me to send over next steps? And if not, then that's totally cool too. So like, that's kind of the whole framework, but I think it's really just based on being very selective about the kind of people you're investing in, because obviously you have to invest in the right people, but also making it very easy for them to see that you've done your research, you care about them, and you're looking at figuring out a way to add value to them, and just allowing them to lean in. And going back to what we said before, the worst thing they can do is say no or not respond. But even if they didn't respond, like you left a good impression, like you weren't trying to push anything on them. You were just trying to add value. So that's a high level of anybody that is looking to build those kinds of relationships and things I've learned along the way, testing many different things.
That's awesome. And so if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that maybe you slid into my LinkedIn DMs and you sent something like that, go back and look at this, resend it. Maybe you get a better response. Now, Brendan, as we get towards the end of our time here together, I always like to ask a question as well, which is there a question which I haven't asked you that I should have?
That's a great question. A question about a question. If I were to go back, and look at the people that I've had the pleasure of interviewing on my show, I always like to look at patterns, right? And one of the biggest patterns that has come up is, well, several things. One is the concept of worthiness, which is kind of a strange thing, but like, I think oftentimes you get trapped into this feeling of needing to solve a problem. Like you have something that comes up and you need to solve all these problems as they come up. And you never ask yourself, well, what caused the problem to be there to begin with, right? And so one of those buggers, or one of those things that's constantly manifesting the problems, is the fact that this sense of worthiness. Like if you don't feel worthy about reaching out to these people, if you don't feel worthy of creating the business that you want to create, then it kind of makes it hard to build a business that's in alignment with what you want to do, right? So worthiness is one of those concepts that it's kind of one of we're traveling into the woo-woo-y territory for some people that may not enjoy that kind of stuff. But I found it to be true based on all these incredible people I've interviewed, is this feeling of worthiness. And the other thing is this quote that comes up all the time on my show: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. And that's by Carl Jung. And I think that is so true, is like we all have these experiences from our childhood, or things that were told to us from teachers or parents or people growing up. And like that's stuck in our brain. And oftentimes, unless you are consciously aware of those things, you can't modify it and make it better for you, right? And they may have just been planted there by other people and you don't even realize that it's sitting there. So being conscious of the fact that you have these early experiences that are shaping who you are, and you're manifesting and acting out all these patterns that were implemented at a very young age, just questioning the fact that if those beliefs serve you anymore, because you can go back as an adult human and say, hey, when I had that free lunch program experience, when I had all these issues, like I used to never tell that story. And I didn't even tell the full story here, but I used to be so embarrassed by that. Like sharing that on a podcast if you told me I was going to share that story on a podcast 10 years ago, I'd have told you were nuts, but it's like, but now that I've had the opportunity to go back, I've rewrote that story. That story is one of the most powerful things that have ever happened to me. And I wouldn't have done anything that I've done today if it weren't for that story. So all those unconscious narratives, I would encourage you, as another topic is to just go back and examine what those are. And another thing that you could do if you want to implement something is, if you're fortunate enough to have your parents around or your grandparents around, interview them, because you'll find when you interview your parents or your grandparents, you start to see those thinking patterns that were placed onto you without you even realizing it. So, and not only that, but like, I just think it would be super cool to listen to my dad have a conversation with my great grandpa, or something like that. So you can preserve that knowledge for future generation. It's dual purpose, but long answer to that. But I think that exploring those early unconscious things and your feelings of worthiness has massive impacts on many areas of your life.
I love that. Now, and Brandon, if anyone's been listening to this and they go, great, I want to find out more about what Brandon's up to and dive deeper into that, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Yeah. Well, the easiest place is to go check out my podcast, whatever this is hitting your earlobes. My podcast is called 7-Figure Millennials. It's all about inspiring millennial entrepreneurs. And maybe I have plenty of people that aren't millennials, but to prioritize your happiness, health, and relationships as we make our entrepreneurial dreams a reality. I teach and I interview people on the show, not as the guru on the mountain, but as the guy that's still figuring it out. I'm 26 years old. I'm still building my first business, my first 7-figure business. And I'm sharing what I'm learning along the way. Right. And so it's an incredible journey. And I would love to have you join and listen on some of the incredible guests I've been on. But if you want some more insights on the magic connection method process, I can put together a special link that I can create on the fly, if that's cool for you, Kim, and I can put that together for you guys.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. So I created a short link. It's just so you're like, that sounds really weird, but it's Fong. So Brandon Fong. So bfo.ng/Kim. Hopefully that's not taken. I think it should be good, but bfo.ng/Kim, and that'll take you to a landing page that I created specifically for you guys, or that'll direct you directly to some good next steps. If you want to grab a checklist that I put on there, that summarizes the magic connection method process. If the next time you're staring at a blank cursor and you're like, oh, what were those things that Brandon said? You can have that as a simple, quick PDF to grab. And you can always shoot me an email to brandon@brandonfong.co. I'm happy to connect and figure out what you have going on and figure out how I can support you.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And so anyone listening, check the show notes above or below. We'll have that link in there, and you can connect with Brandon. And of course, if you know anyone that maybe they've been struggling with their connection, their ability to connect, maybe they've been guilty of being one of those people on LinkedIn, just trying to push messages without actually any thought, please share this episode with them. Get some of Brandon's wisdom into their ears. And again, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim. This has been a blast. I appreciate you and what you're doing in the world, my friend. Seriously, I say I appreciate podcasters, but you're a master at your craft. You're great at asking questions, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.